At 0400 local time, a motorized assault element of the Russian armed forces pushes out from the tree line into the pre-dawn gray of the eastern Ukrainian sector. They are not in armored personnel carriers, nor are they creeping forward in infantry fighting vehicles. They are riding dirt bikes, a column of 32 cross-country motorcycles tearing across the open steppe at 70 km/h. Speed is their armor. The tactical math here is brutally simple. Move faster than artillery can track, close the distance before mortars can register the coordinates, and overwhelm the trench line with a sudden swarm of dismounted infantry. It is a desperate evolution of modern assault tactics, trading heavy steel for sheer velocity. And if it works, they will be in the Ukrainian trenches before the defenders can finish their morning coffee. But this entire doctrine relies on one critical assumption, an assumption that will ultimately cost every man music in this formation his life within the next 3 minutes. They believe they are invisible until they are close. They are wrong. 3,000 km away, a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone is already watching them from an altitude of 500 m. The drone operator does not need light to see them. The high-performance thermal optic on the drone is picking up 32 hot, internal combustion engines screaming across a cold field. The speed that was supposed to save them has just turned them into the brightest thermal anomalies in a 5-kilometer radius. They are lit up like a neon sign on a dark highway. The Russian commander knows the sky is hostile, so he has brought an umbrella. Trailing the main body of the motorcycle swarm is a modified all-terrain vehicle carrying a heavy electronic warfare jammer. This system broadcasts a massive dome of electromagnetic noise designed to sever the control links between Ukrainian operators and their first-person view strike drones. Think of it like a mobile dead zone. As long as that jammer is broadcasting, any drone that flies within 500 meters of the formation will lose music its video feed, drop out of the sky, and crash harmlessly into the dirt. For the first 60 seconds of the assault, the electronic warfare dome works perfectly. 2 Ukrainian interceptor drones attempt to dive on the lead riders, only to spin out of control as their screens turn to static. The Russian column pushes further into the gray zone, confident that their electronic shield is holding. But the Ukrainian Combat Information Center is not panicking. They expected this. You cannot hide a massive broadcasting signal on a modern battlefield. In the electronic spectrum, turning on a powerful jammer is like setting off a flare in a pitch-black room. You might blind the guy looking right at you, but you just told everyone else exactly where you were standing. The Ukrainian reconnaissance drone switches its targeting priority from the motorcycles to the all-terrain vehicle in the rear. The shield is about to become a target. Instead of flying directly into the jamming dome, the Ukrainian drone team employs a mathematical workaround. They launch a specialized interceptor drone from a higher altitude. They do not fly it by video feed. They program it to dive at terminal velocity, straight down toward the source of the electromagnetic interference. By approaching from directly above, the drone spends less than 2 seconds inside the jamming bubble before impact. Gravity and momentum do the rest. The operator watches the thermal feed from the high-altitude observation drone as the interceptor plummets toward the all-terrain vehicle. The jammer manages to sever the control link at the very last moment. But physics does not care about severed video feeds. A 2 kilo-shaped charge, traveling at 150 km/h, slams directly into the jamming unit. The explosion tears the all-terrain vehicle apart, sending a shockwave of shrapnel and burning lithium batteries across the dirt track. In a fraction of a second, the invisible electromagnetic dome collapses. The protective dead zone vanishes. The Russian motorcycle column is now $2,000 emitter, away from the tree line, moving at maximum speed through a completely open corridor, and they are totally naked to the sky. The operators back in the Ukrainian bunker do not hesitate. A swarm of 10 first-person view drones previously holding position just outside the jamming range instantly surges forward like hornets pouring out of a kicked nest. The lead rider of the Russian formation checks his mirrors entirely, unaware that the electronic umbrella behind him has just evaporated. He is pushing 80 km/h focused entirely on the uneven terrain ahead. The first Ukrainian strike drone comes in low, skimming just 3 meters above the grass to mask its acoustic signature against the roar of the motorcycle engines. The operator does not aim for the rider, he aims for the front tire. At 80 km/h, you do not need a massive explosion to cause catastrophic damage. You just need to disrupt the balance. The drone detonates. It is a small blast, but it instantly shreds the front suspension of the lead dirt bike. The motorcycle digs violently into the soil, catapulting the rider forward like a rag doll. Because the formation is packed so tightly to stay within the original, now destroyed jamming dome, the spacing between the bikes is less than 15 meter. The second rider has exactly 0.7 seconds to react to the tumbling wreckage of his commander. He grabs the brakes, locks the rear wheel, and slides sideways into the dirt. The third and fourth riders slam directly into the pileup. In less than 10 seconds, what was a coordinated high-speed cavalry charge has devolved into a massive tangled wreck of burning fuel, twisted metal, and disoriented soldiers. The speed that was meant to be their primary tactical advantage has just been weaponized against them by simple geometry. In this second phase of the analysis, we will examine music, how the tactical situation devolves for the dismounted survivors, and how the drone operators adapt their hunting patterns in real time. As the dust settles over the 4 motorcycle pileup, the surviving riders realize their high-speed charge has become a static nightmare. The remaining 28 motorcycles violently scatter, veering off the dirt track and into the open fields to avoid the burning wreckage. This is exactly what the Ukrainian drone operators want. A tight formation is difficult to hit without risking collateral damage to other drones, but a scattered force is just a buffet of isolated targets. The Russian riders abandon their bikes, diving into the tall grass and shallow artillery craters, hoping that stillness will save them. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of the threat. Against a human sniper, stillness is camouflage. Against a thermal camera orbiting at 300 meters, a stationary human body is just a glowing white beacon against the cold earth. The Ukrainian Combat Information Center dynamically shifts its tactics on the fly. The swarm of first-person view drones is given a new directive. They are no longer targeting a formation. They are executing a systematic cleanup operation. The first dismounted soldier attempts to sprint toward a nearby trench line, but he only makes it 30 meters before a drone descends from his blind spot and detonates instantly. The Russian command structure had anticipated the threat of aerial interception and assigned a mobile air defense element to trail the motorcycle unit, but the technology deployed is fighting the wrong war. A pair of soldiers armed with shoulder-fired infrared, guided surface-to-air missiles step out from the distant tree line, scanning the sky for the drones tearing their unit apart. The missile seekers growl, searching for the massive heat signatures of helicopter turbines or jet engines. But the Ukrainian strike drones are powered by lithium polymer batteries and electric motors. They generate roughly the same thermal footprint as a household toaster. The infrared seekers on the multi-million-dollar missiles are entirely blind to them. The operators furiously sweep the sky, trying to lock onto targets that are moving at 120 km/h at an altitude of just 20 meters. The geometry of the engagement is impossible. The missiles require a minimum altitude and distance to arm their warheads, but the drones are already inside their minimum engagement range. A Ukrainian drone pilot notices the air defense team and immediately banks his craft into a steep dive. The Russian soldier finally sees the incoming threat through his iron sights and drops the useless missile tube to raise his rifle. He fires a burst of unguided bullets into the air, but hitting a maneuverable plastic disc traveling at terminal velocity is statistically 0. The drone impacts the ground right between them. With their electronic warfare shield vaporized and their air defense element rendered entirely useless, the remaining Russian infantrymen are trapped in a deadly game of mathematics where the odds drop by the second. The open steppe offers 0 overhead cover. There are no concrete bunkers or thick tree canopies to hide beneath, only shallow depressions and the burning wreckage of their own motorcycles. A group of 5 soldiers huddles behind the smoking remains of a dirt bike, hoping the thermal output of the burning fuel will mask their body heat from music, the optical sensors above. It is a smart tactical calculation, but it vastly underestimates the resolution of modern reconnaissance technology. The overhead observer simply switches the drone camera from thermal imaging to high-define color video. The camouflage is broken in less than a heartbeat. The soldiers are wearing dark green uniforms against pale brown earth, making them perfectly visible from 200 men or up. The observer relays the exact coordinates to another loitering strike drone. This drone does not rush the attack. It descends slowly, deliberately, hovering just out of rifle range to survey the target area and ensure maximum effect. The soldiers point their rifles upward, frantically pulling their triggers, but the drone operator simply jinks the joystick, easily dodging the sporadic small arms fire. Once the magazines run dry and panic takes over, the drone operator pushes the throttle forward, ending the brief standoff. The surviving Russian riders, trapped in the open and taking catastrophic losses, scream into their radios for an immediate extraction. Russian command scrambles a quick reaction force consisting of 3 heavy armored personnel carriers. The tactical assumption is that thick steel armor will succeed where lightweight motorcycles just failed. The armored column pushes out from the rear tree lines to diesel engines roaring, expecting to simply roll straight through the drone swarm, absorb any small explosive impacts, and extract the pinned infantrymen. They are moving fast, attempting to cover the $3,000 M of open ground in under 4 minutes. The Ukrainian tactical network instantly detects this new incoming threat. The high-altitude reconnaissance drones do not even need to shift their physical position. The operators simply widen their camera field of view to capture the approaching armor. The element of surprise is completely non-existent. The Ukrainian commanders do not redirect the light drones that are currently hunting the motorcycle survivors. Instead, they activate a secondary flight of much heavier interceptor drones, specifically engineered to carry armor-piercing tandem warheads, immediately launching them toward the incoming rescue column. The stakes on the battlefield are instantly raised again. The Russian armored vehicles desperately try to exploit a narrow tree line to mask their forward approach, banking on the bare winter foliage to break the optical line of sight. It is a highly logical maneuver against traditional optical cameras, but a completely fatal miscalculation against persistent thermal surveillance. The trees have lost their leaves, and the massive diesel engines of the personnel carriers glow with a blinding white heat signature that bleeds straight through the thin wooden branches. The lead driver spots an incoming interceptor drone through his viewport and immediately triggers his defensive smoke dispensers. Thick white phosphorus clouds explode outward, instantly concealing the entire vehicle from the naked human eye. But the Ukrainian drone operator simply toggles his video feed back to the thermal imaging spectrum. The hot metal of the engine block shines brightly and clearly through the cold chemical smoke screen. The drone dives straight down the exhaust vent and detonates upon impact. The shaped charge blasts downward, disabling the heavy engine instantly and turning the 30-ton vehicle into an immovable roadblock. The 2 personnel carriers traveling directly behind it slam on their brakes, trapped in the narrow corridor with nowhere to turn. Stuck squarely behind the burning wreckage of their lead vehicle, the remaining 2 armored personnel carriers are now sitting ducks in the middle of a registered kill zone. The drivers frantically attempt to throw their heavy machines into reverse, but moving a tracked vehicle backward through a confined dirt pathway is a painfully slow and clumsy process. The Ukrainian operators seize this brief window of opportunity immediately. A second heavy drone strikes the rear vehicle, aiming precisely at the exposed rear engine deck where the steel armor is at its absolute thinnest. The resulting explosion severs the primary fuel lines, and the vehicle violently erupts in an uncontrollable fire. Now the middle vehicle is completely boxed in, trapped tightly between 2 burning armored husks. The infantrymen trapped inside the surviving middle carrier realize that their supposed steel fortress has just become an inescapable steel coffin. They throw open the heavy top hatches and scramble out into the freezing dirt, completely abandoning the vehicle. By trying to send heavy reinforcements, the Russian command has merely delivered more high-value targets into an already saturated area, heavily compounding the disaster. Back in the open field, the surviving dismounted motorcycle troops watch the thick black smoke rising from their destroyed rescue column in the distance. The psychological impact on the ground is immediate and completely devastating. The terrifying realization sets in that absolutely no one is coming to save them now. The remaining 10 soldiers make a desperate, panicked decision to break their minimal cover and run on foot back toward their original starting position. They are attempting to sprint $3,000 menor across open, muddy ground while wearing heavy ballistic body armor and carrying heavy automatic weapons. It is an impossible physical feat under normal combat conditions, let alone while being actively hunted from the open sky. The Ukrainian drone operators do not even need to use their limited explosives for the first minute of the retreat. They simply fly their quadcopters in incredibly low, aggressively buzzing, just a few feet above the running soldiers. The terrifying acoustic whine of the electric drone motors induces pure, unadulterated panic. The soldiers desperately look up, lose their footing, and stumble face first into the mud, exhausting their remaining energy. The Ukrainian Combat Information Center ruthlessly utilizes the psychological terror of the buzzing drones to physically herd the remaining disorganized forces. Rather than striking the running soldiers randomly across the wide field, the operators deliberately coordinate their flight paths to push the exhausted men toward a highly specific pre-registered coordinate. The drones dive aggressively from the left and the right sides, forcing the terrified men to instinctively veer toward a slight natural depression in the terrain. The Russian soldiers desperately believe they are finally finding a pocket of safe cover, but they are actually walking straight into the center of a pre-sighted artillery target point. Once all the remaining personnel are grouped tightly together inside the shallow crater, the buzzing drones pull back simultaneously, rapidly climbing to a safe operating altitude. The soldiers have exactly 3 seconds to wonder why the terrifying noise has suddenly stopped. Suddenly, 3 precision-guided mortar shells fired from a concealed battery 4 kilometers away detonate simultaneously in the air directly over the depression. The airburst munitions rain lethal steel shrapnel downward, totally devastating the group target. The battlefield suddenly falls completely silent, save for the crackle of burning vehicle fuel and the distant high-pitched hum of the reconnaissance drones still orbiting effortlessly high above the carnage. From the exact moment the first dirt motorcycle aggressively crossed the tree line to the final devastating mortar strike, exactly 3 minutes have elapsed in total. A fully equipped, highly mobile motorized assault unit, initially backed by a dedicated electronic warfare system and subsequently supported by heavy armored reinforcements, has been completely and systematically eradicated without a single Ukrainian infantry soldier ever stepping out of their defensive trench or firing a standard rifle. The staggering asymmetry of this rapid engagement redefines the entire modern concept of cost-effective warfare. The entire swarm of Ukrainian strike drones deployed in this specific operation cost less than $50,000 to manufacture. They just flawlessly dismantled a motorized element and a heavy quick reaction force worth millions of dollars, not even including the irreplaceable loss of trained combat manpower. The Russian strategy relied entirely on overwhelming momentum. But momentum means nothing when the enemy controls the sky. This 3-minute tactical annihilation reveals the terrifying reality of the modern interconnected battlefield, where the sky is always awake and rapid movement is tantamount to operational suicide. The Russian assault doctrine assumed that extreme speed would act as a viable substitute for heavy armor, theoretically allowing them to close the distance before the enemy commanders could adequately react. But in an era defined by persistent overhead drone surveillance, speed no longer provides any form of physical protection. It merely increases a unit's overall thermal exposure and behavioral predictability. The low-cost explosive drones have massively compressed the tactical timeline, completely eliminating the traditional defensive delay between detecting a moving target and delivering a lethal pinpoint strike. The modern battlefield is now a frictionless environment for the prepared defender, where any attempt to maneuver forward is instantly met with overwhelming precision violence. Speed, once hailed as the ultimate tactical advantage, is now the exact mechanism that guarantees a unit's destruction. The fundamental rules of war have been rewritten entirely by operators staring at glowing screens.